Greetings metalheads and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today I have yet another heavy Relics installment for you where I'm going to be showing off another 4 of my latest vinyl purchases, all of which are falling within the death metal subgenre but across the death metal spectrum and timescale in fact. So 4 albums, 4 very good albums as well, but all recent acquisitions of mine that I am absolutely thrilled to have and ready to show off. So the first choice, we'll kick off with a classic band, an absolutely reliable heritage death metal band, the mighty Obituary from Florida. This band, you cannot underestimate or overstate just how important these guys are for the development of extreme metal and death metal, with classic albums, seriously influential albums like Slowly We Rot, their debut album, and of course Cause of Death and The End Complete. Those ones in particular have a huge impact. They did split up for a while, reforming in around 2003, and they released this album in 2005. So this is the sort of the comeback album, if you like. This is Frozen in Time. This particular version I've got here is a reissue from the last couple of years, I believe. An album that I don't have on CD. There's a couple of gaps in my Obituary discography, and this was one. And for some unknown reason, you either can't find a copy of this album, Frozen in Time, very readily on CD, but if you do, it's likely to cost you an absolute fortune, which is really sad. However, one day, while I was scouring Amazon, I believe, I happened to just scroll across and see this vinyl copy for, I think it was around £15. So I was really quite shocked. Even more shocked to then click on it and discover that it is an absolutely gorgeous green coloured vinyl, splatter vinyl, and I'm really hoping that the glare isn't too criminal and that you can actually see the colour scheme here. It's really cool. This is a freaking cool colour scheme. It really looks the part. When you do hold it up to the light, it's absolutely glorious. So what do I think of this album? Well, I think it's a very good album, actually. I think it's a very solid, groovy Obituary album. No, I wouldn't say that it's as good as the likes of Cause of Death or The End Complete. No. Nor would I say it's as good as their really strong recent releases with the likes of Inked in Blood, the self-titled album, and the absolutely stunning new album Dying of Everything from this very year, in fact. However, I would say this is a really good album. It's heavily influenced by the kind of groovy, swaggering style that was infecting bands like 6 Feet Under as well at the time. Certainly very prominent on a track like Blindsided or Mindset, in fact, or Standalone, in fact. But these are still good songs, but they've got this real kind of swaggering groove to them. It's still death metal. It's still Obituary. Obituary have one of the most identifiable, readily identifiable sounds and styles within death metal, in my opinion. And I don't think that that is something which isn't shared by a lot of death metal fans. Instantly definable with the likes of John and Don Tardy. They're very unique styles respectively, whether it be vocals or drum style. We've got some great riffs, some really heavy groovy riffs. We've got some really great vocal work, really reliable stuff. We've got some furious drumming. You cannot fault the musicianship. I think that it's just very influenced by what was going on within extreme metal at the time. But you kick off with the brilliant musical introduction, the intro piece and instrumental piece, in fact, Redneck Stomp, which is a very interesting name for a track, and it's also just a very interesting track. It's so punchy, it's so memorable because of those great riffs, such heavy grooves. It's a brilliant track. You got On the Floor, another good one. Insane, those particularly groovy tracks that I've mentioned. But you've also got Slow Death. You've got Denied, the closing track, Lockjaw as well. All good stuff. All really reliable death metal tracks. On this version, you've got, on this reissue release, you've got 3 live tracks from Live at Dynamo Festival 2005, including By the Light, Threatening Skies, and Solid State. Good versions, good tracks. But the actual album itself is really good. It's a really good album, very solid, and looks absolutely stunning on that beautiful green vinyl. So there we are. That gap in my collection has been finally filled with Obituary frozen in time on lovely colourful vinyl. So remaining with heritage death metal bands, if you like, this band, the mighty Suffocation, with Breeding the Spawn. These guys are considered far and wide as being one of the main influences and instigators of what is known as brutal death metal, and pretty much the creators of slam, or slamming brutal death metal, however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. There is no one in extreme metal that wasn't influenced by Suffocation, because let's face it, these guys pack so much punch. They are freaking brutal as well. This album, widely criticised for its production, the fact that it's got very murky, dull production. However, I think it sounds really good on vinyl, and this beautiful blue vinyl is absolutely glorious. Really love it. It's such a nice electric blue. Again, I'm hoping that it's not too glary, but really looks the part. Really, really neat. Such a cool thing. As I say, this album does get a lot of stick because of its production. Understandable. It is certainly not as good as the production on Effigies of the Forgotten, the debut album. However, I would still say that this is 1993, so this is early on in death metal. But actually, I think it sounds pretty good. I think it stands up there. So I do think it gets a little bit of unnecessary level of stick based on the production. But you've got some killer tracks here. Beginning of Sorrow, Breeding the Spawn, Epitaph of the Credulous, Marital Decimation. We've got Anomalistic Offerings, Ignorant Deprivation. Just really good songs. This is solid. You've got some killer riff work there. Really hard, brutal, crushing slam moments. Not in the terms of modern sort of slamming death metal, but really great. Just the heavy grooves. Less of a slam than more of a heavy groove. Frank Mullen's vocals are absolutely monstrous. He is right up there with the likes of Chris Barnes and George Fisher in my mind. You cannot fault Frank's brutal, bestial vocal performance. Riffs are killer. Bass work is intricate and booming. It's brilliant. I'd say this is a really solid album. Would I say it's my favourite Suffocation album? Probably not, because I think the pure brilliance of Effigies of the Forgotten really does take some beating. Likewise, some of their more recent albums, like Pinnacle of Bedlam or Of the Dark Light, those are also absolutely crushing albums. But I'd say this is definitely tied first, if not second, with Effigies. This is a brilliant album. This is a fantastic album. Breeding the Spawn, the mighty Suffocation, released in 1993. This is a 2016 nice blue colourful reissue. So, that's Suffocation. Now we've got the most Suffocation sounding band that aren't Suffocation. We've got Pyrexia with their latest studio album from 2021. This is released on Unique Leader Records. This is Gravitas Maximus. Really disturbing album cover there. Really weird and gruesome. This album is awesome. This is really brutal death metal. I would say that this is freaking crushing stuff. It's a pretty short and sweet album. It's around 30 minutes long. So keeping in the length, similar sort of length of Breeding the Spawn. Pyrexia have in the past had members in common with Suffocation, but at times the resemblance in their sound and style is a little bit uncanny. So I think there is definitely a strong influence there. However, Pyrexia, really solid band, and this is a really, really solid album. This hits freaking hard. The opening track, We Are Many, crushes. Apostles to the Grave, brilliant track. Real standout, we've got Day the Earth Shook. In brackets, we've got Survival of the Fittest. Pawn to King, which is absolutely savage. The Art of Infamy, Rule of Two, Bludgeoned by Deformity, and the title track there. Really short and sweet. One track seamlessly flows into the next. It's that kind of album where you just put it on and it just bulldozes through, absolutely smashes. It's freaking heavy. What is really nice, and I really do think that Unique Leader Records really do make a real effort, and they go the extra mile with their vinyl, because none of it is just straightforward and boring. Just look at that. That is complex. That is high quality, really interesting looking colour scheme there. Really interesting stuff. Looks freaking cool. It's a freaking cool album. You've got some absolutely monstrous vocal works. Again, there's a kind of similar vibe to like Frank Mullins style vocal work. Riffs, again, you've got some of those seriously monstrous grooves and sort of slamming moments. The blast beats are coming out of your eyeballs, just overflowing. Killer riffs, killer drumming, insane. There's no slow moments on this album, shall we say. You've got some crushing grooves and some sort of slam-esque riffs, but really, this is breakneck speed, brutal death metal with a serious punch. Pyrexia, Gravitas Maximus. Not the usual sort of stuff that I reach for, but I've been trying to delve a little bit deeper into the brutal death metal world again, as it's been quite a few years since I've really given brutal death metal a try, and I'm glad that I made this purchase. Pyrexia, Gravitas Maximus. So keeping with brutal death metal then, we have one last record here. This one is a real stunner. From Australia, formed in around 2009, I believe. This is the third album, The Decaying Light, from Disentomb. That artwork is so creepy, but so cool. Really love that. So much weird stuff going on there, so much depth. This is a really lovely double album as well. Again, this is out on Unique Leader Records. This was released in 2019, so it's a couple of years old now. Only the third album as well. These guys aren't a particularly prolific band with releasing material very frequently. They certainly made a massive impact on the extreme metal scene with their album, which I believe it was 2014 or maybe 2015. The second album, Misery, which is an absolutely glorious album. And this album very much sits in that vein. Absolutely love the quality of these records. Those beautiful colour schemes. I don't think you're going to be able to see, but on this side, it's actually embossed as well with their title. We've got a couple of little logo things there, and then we've got the Decaying Light as well. Really beautiful record, absolutely beautiful. So the album itself is a really surprisingly beautiful album. It's the kind of album that's got so much atmosphere and so much kind of aura to it. It's not just straight for the jugular, crushing brutal death metal like Pyrexia. It is brutal death metal, and Disentomb do tend to get kind of lumped in with the slam metal lot, but in my mind, this is not slam. This is brutal death metal with loads of atmospherics, loads of feeling. It's deep, it's dark. Certainly with tracks like Collapsing Skies, Undying Dysphoria, Centuries of Deluge, or the Decaying Light as well. Some of these tracks, they have a whole lot of depth. There's a really dark ambience to it. The instrumentals and the musicianship is absolutely faultless. It's very technical without being what I call widdly diddly music, where it's just insane, just off this planet, crazy sci-fi soundtrack stuff. It's not like that at all. You've got complexity, you've got technicality, and you've got progressive elements, but it's not over the top, not by any means. The drumming is pretty superb, gotta say. You've got a decent number of blast beats thrown in there. Of course you have. It's brutal death metal. but you've also got some interesting other elements. Vocally, we've got a really interesting but strong vocal performance. It's almost like a disembodied kind of bestial howl. It's like a haunting vocal style. It's very much textured into the background, into the atmospherics. It's very difficult to really describe, but I hope I'm doing it some justice. But the vocals are very strong, very good. It's guttural, but it's not right in your face like Corpse Grinder Fisher or anything like that. It's part of the atmosphere. It's part of the ambience. The riffs are brilliant. As I say, you've got technicality, yes, but you've also got some decent chug. You've got some great tracks like Invocation in the Cathedral of Dust, Rebirth through Exoriation, trying to pronounce these things correctly, Dismal Liturgies, where you've got some crushing riff work as well. You've got a decent sort of chug in there. You've got some very killer grooves as well. But it's technical, it's intricate, but it's not over the top. Absolutely, mind is blown by this one. I would say this is one of the best brutal death metal albums that I've heard in a very long time. It's a real gem, and I'm really pleased that I stumbled across this one. Again, this was Amazon. It was about £15. After purchasing it, I think it rocketed back up in price, which I'm not really surprised about, because that does seem to happen quite often on Amazon. Prices just seem to increase and decrease of their own will. But hey ho, I'm just very pleased that I managed to find this album and purchase it when I did. So The Decaying Light, Disentombed from Australia, an absolutely glorious album. Just to recap our other choices there, our other latest heavy relics. We have Pyrexia with Gravitas Maximus. We've got brutal death metal legends Suffocation with Breeding the Spawn. And of course, heritage death metal legends Obituary with Frozen in Time. So there's my latest little haul of 4 heavy relics. What are your thoughts and opinions on these bands, on these albums? Do you have the same copies? Do you have different feelings to my opinions and thoughts on these particular albums or on these bands? Very interested to hear the thoughts and opinions of others, as always. Thank you very much for watching, my friends. Feel free to like and subscribe, as always. Do check back soon for more reviews and recommendations of all things good and heavy. Take care, my friends. Stay heavy.